All right, all right, all right. Okay, and we're here with Mr. Nick Gallagher, the actor who plays Duncan Port. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. I'm glad to talk to you, do your exit interview, and
Yeah, me too.
it was a great experience recording with you. But before we get into all that, how did you get involved with the project and all?
Well, you and I met at a beloved South Pasadena establishment, Charlie's Coffee House, and I guess I kept running into you there, and maybe noticed like a Star Wars shirt or something you had on, and it came up that I was an actor and you were a storyteller, and that you had been working on this podcast, and I'm trying to remember what that was. That was this year. That was 2022, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So that so that was at that must have been sort of right after the holidays when everyone is sort of in this like post Christmas hangover lull.
yeah.
Myself especially after the last 2 years, and I was getting ready to steel myself to sort of get back into the rat race of being an actor, like auditioning all the time and getting back into classes because it's basically running your own business. And when I heard you talk about the Star Wars podcast, because I think we had even talked about like our favorite Star Wars stories. Like I might have raved to you about Knights of the Old Republic and other ones like that. I thought it would be good a really good story to take part in for its own sake. Like I think you can kind of lose sight of that when you're an actor in LA. Like when you try to do anything professionally, like you can get so caught up in um sort of external trappings and validation, whether it's sort of advancement or money or exposure, but um Lightspeed just sounded like something fun to do, and so it was an opportunity that came along when I really needed to get back to the joy of it all, and that absolutely delivered on that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I remember when we were first talking and first got to know each other, you were reading Sid Field's book
Yeah,
about screenplays,
yeah, that's right.
and I've read that book, everything, and it's a great book, and
Hmm.
I love writing and all that. So we got talking about that. I heard that you
Yeah,
were,
that's right. That's right.
I heard that you were specifically you did audiobooks. You
Yeah,
performed an audio
yeah.
read for audiobooks and all that.
Yeah, I'm doing that as soon as I hang up here, actually. I guess that came up as well because I mentioned that like I do voiceover and have my own studio and stuff, but that was the silver lining of everything falling apart in 2020 for me, which was
Mhm.
prior to that I was doing a lot of standard, uninteresting sort of actor side hustle jobs, like, a background actor in TV shows or like, doing brand ambassador stuff, but all that work is contingent upon being around other people. So when the country locked down, all that went. And so I had a stressful couple of days right when quarantine started of how am I going to provide for myself. And so I remembered that I had brought with me to LA a microphone that my parents gave me for Christmas. Like this was 8 years prior, that was just gathering dust. And so, and I knew that there was audiobooks was something I'd done like once or twice before, but didn't really like it. But I was like, okay, I don't know what else I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
So I dusted it off, I plugged it in, and I spent like 2 days, I think, sending out something like 45 auditions for audiobooks. And then it slowly over the course of that year built up to something that now thankfully
Mhm.
sustains me.
Duncan Port, skipper. Heard through the Jogan vine that you were looking for discreet transport, but I never got a location.
I'm headed to the planet Tython.
Tython. That's in the deep core. What's your business there?
Is that relevant?
Kid, if you need a box of fruit shipped over there in a timely fashion, it's relevant. I need to get there in a timely manner, right? Now, am I taking you in a box of choco berries or something else?
But no, it was just something that started in 2020, and it just started out as like a kind of like a move of desperation to stay afloat. But it's thankfully just built to the point where like it's consistent and sustains me. And I will say though that Lightspeed was probably the most fun I've had doing voiceover thus far in my career.
Oh, but that's really I really am excited to hear that, especially because I've started the editing process. The first scene I edited was the one you heard of, where our characters meet, and I think that it's sounding really good so far.
Yeah.
And I think you're sounding really good in it. I was really surprised when you came up to me and said, "Hey, you want to talk about this project you're doing?" Um, Specifically for that role of Duncan, because I thought I was kind of screwed on it. I was like, oh God, I don't know what I'm gonna do with that role. I don't know anyone. And then you kind of fall out of the sky. And the opportunity, it's like you can't waste that opportunity. So I was very excited to talk to you, and especially once you sent that sample of your audiobook, I was like, oh yeah, this is it. So let's talk a little bit about the role that you play in
Sure.
this. You play Duncan Port, the skipper. You want to tell them about the character a little bit?
Well, so if you're familiar at all with Star Wars, you're familiar perhaps with the archetype of a ship captain who is perhaps lives in a sort of morally gray area and is in need of direction and a cause in his life to fight for. Um, and Duncan falls into that sphere and has I think he is distinguished by over the course of his story a little bit more both empathy and also melancholy more readily observable at the outset, and that reveals itself more over the course of the story. I think I don't think Star Wars, the stories that I think about, I don't think it's super common for them to have for characters to be burdened with the wounds of their past. Now that I think about it, like there's some here and there, but you often don't encounter that from supporting characters in Star Wars stories. And so I thought that was an intriguing dimension to um to a character that could have been a little bit more of like a narrow, like sort of middle of the road um kind of rogue type that you encounter a lot. But he has this um he's, as my dad would say about my brother and me, he's a man of strong likes and dislikes, where he has his enemies from his past and the pain that they've caused them, and those are enemies for life. And anyone who he thinks has suffered similarly to him, or um just in need of help as he has been in his life, I think he is drawn to, perhaps without even realizing it, perhaps more so than he would admit to himself.
Yeah, I think when I heard that clip you sent me of the audiobook that you were reading, the not only just like the texture of your voice, but the way you kind of transitioned from different character and everything, and different styles of speech, I guess affects. It felt really natural, and I was thinking Duncan was the first guy I was thinking about it, because I wasn't sure when you brought up to me you wanted to take part in this project. I wasn't 100% on who you could be, and then I hear that I'm like, oh, he's got to be Duncan, because Duncan, the way and when we met that one time and did a couple of readings,
That's
kind
right.
of like the audition process a little bit, I felt that you had it perfectly. Like the way I was writing it, it's very rare when you write something and you meet an actor who reads it almost exactly the way you wrote it, and heard it in your head. And I felt like that's what was going on with you, because
I'm so glad.
yeah, it was and when people hear it, I think they're really going to hear that character lifted from the page. You know what I mean? Like I was proud of the project, proud of you, proud of everything, because it was really, really exciting to get the recording process done.
Yeah,
um
man.
so how does this experience of performing and recording differ from your other experiences with acting?
You're given less context um to inform your performance, which is something that I don't think I even realized until I heard that first edited scene that you sent me.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you perform in any other context, whether you're on camera, you have like a scene partner to work with, and you're on set, and there's always there's always a dimension of physicality to it. If you're doing theater, that physicality is amplified by a factor of like 10 to reach your audience and to make a bigger stage picture. This is my first time doing sort of like a narrative in voiceover, and it was really striking to see to have none of that. And so that is why, like, if you've ever seen behind the scenes, for example, of like a Pixar film, or like Pedro Pascal and The Mandalorian,
Mm-hmm.
there's this one like behind the scenes shot of him like in the first season where he's the Mandalorian, and he's in the booth recording his lines, and you see him, he's got a pillow in one hand and he's got his arm outstretched in the other, exactly like he's doing like his character is doing on screen. And I had always wondered, I had always understood why you do that. Like when I record in my booth, like I will, and like if I'm doing characters for an audiobook, like I'll find myself like gesturing like them. And it was a unique challenge to just have less space to work with. Like this is my living room. If we were recording in my booth, it would just be this dark phone booth that I think your viewers would wonder, like, am I held prisoner somewhere? And so being my own biggest critic and just knowing my voice better than anyone, like I can hear moments where it's like, okay, yeah, he's sitting in a chair.
Mm-hmm.
But what I can say is that particularly as the drama ramps up, like towards the end of the second act into the finale, like the writing in Lightspeed is such that you don't have to. I didn't think I didn't feel bereft of what an actor is usually provided on other sets or in other contexts, thankfully. So it was a unique challenge, but it was also a great introduction to it, just given the material.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that. We kind of talked a little bit about Star Wars as a whole, and when we met, we started talking about Star Wars and you mentioned Knights of the Old Republic and all that. What film of Star Wars is the one that really hooked you, as a fan, Is it Empire? Is it the original trilogy era?
It was probably I'm trying to remember the very first one that I saw, because they re-released them in theaters in the mid-90s. So when I was like a toddler. So my mom took my brother and me to go see them. And I thought that's when they were being released for the first time. So later when someone was like, those movies are from the 70s, I was like, what are you talking about? It was either Empire or Return of the Jedi, because those are the ones that I remember seeing in the big screen when I was like 4. Probably I mean, I don't know, man. I could go on and on depending on how much time you have, because like different elements of different films resonated with me. So like because they were the first ones that I saw, the original trilogy was, I think, the most formative for me. But then, like, as I grew to be a sophomoric preteen teenager, I was really taken with just like the overwhelm of spectacle and visual effects of the prequels. Not really understanding the criticisms of those movies till I got a little bit older. But I do, honestly, I think the story that I still enjoy the most is actually just Knights of the Old Republic. I know that's not a movie, but it's like it's very much in the vein of the sort of the tone and the magnitude of a Star Wars story, and I think it captures that just about as well as any of the other movies.
Yeah, and that's kind of like why on another aspect as to why this was a perfect fit in terms of you getting involved, because this story is set a little bit before that time of the Knights of the Old Republic. So, it's cool little everything was kind of fitting in place, right? During the whole
Mhm.
project and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Reza Malkish, lower tier bounty hunter.
Lower tier? Unlike you, Port, I just caught the biggest score in the room.
Oh yeah? How do you fellas feel about that? 175k all to Reza? You sure you're alright with that?
You think my boys will turn on me?
Is there anything specific in terms of an emotional reaction you would hope the audience gets from listening to Star Wars rather than watching it?
Oh, that's a great question. I think what it will provide them is an opportunity to use their imagination to fill in the blanks. And I
Mhm.
think that anything that isn't film allows an audience to do that. Like theater is a perfect example where you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit more. Um, but when you sit down and the lights come down, once there's that understanding between the performers and the audience, um, uh, like a performer can do has a greater range of possibility what they can do to tell a story the audience will go along with because they have that understanding. Um, so I think with Lightspeed, I think there's so many iconic visuals that Star Wars is known for throughout the decades. Conversely, though, there's also among I think like hardcore nerd culture or Star Wars fans, I think there could be this understanding though that there's also the issue of retread ground. Like
Yeah.
how many times are we going to see a story that takes place in Tatooine?
Mhm.
Or what's another good example? Or a snow planet, or excuse me, in the case of The Last Jedi, it's salt.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Conversely though, uh for your viewers who don't know, I mean, Lightspeed goes so early into the mythology of Star Wars that traveling at light speed doesn't exist yet, and
Mhm.
it is taking people to um, locations and putting them in conflicts that even a Star Wars fan will be exposed to for the first time. So you get to imagine that for yourself. So I think so to your question about like what kind of emotional reaction is there, I think that there's a unique sort of wonder that awaits someone who wants to explore the world of Star Wars via audio, and um, something that will be more their own, like whatever it is that you imagine um, uh, being aboard one of the charter ships in Act Three, that's gonna be yours. Whatever that winds up looking like, it's gonna look like that for you, based on what you hear.
Wow, that's such a great point, because it's something I thought of while writing. There are, like you mentioned, the iconic figureheads of Star Wars, like the Death Star, the ships, and everything. And it's hard to write away from that. Like I still don't fully know what kind of droid came on six is. You know what I mean? Like I still have that image like rattling in my head. Does he float? Does he roll? Is he like a humanoid kind of droid? Does he have no arms? Does he have no body? You know what I mean? Like so that's an interesting point that I'm very curious how, when this comes out, when it's fully done,
Yeah.
hopefully the audio, everything about it, the audio will help visualize that in people's minds.
Well, it'll be really interesting is if because I have no doubt that there are fans of this mythology who will eat up any story that comes along. I'd be very curious to see like an artist's interpretation
Mm.
of Gordon or Duncan or Reza or
Yeah.
any of the other characters.
Yeah, when I started writing, I did have a couple sketches just to, as reference, a couple, and I thought they were cool. And it's funny that you bring that up. My dream is, hopefully, if this comes out and if people like it, or if it comes out, when it comes out,
When it comes out.
and if people like it, and my dream would be an animator coming up and saying, "Hey, let me do something with it," because that would be fantastic. There's
Okay.
on YouTube, someone is doing currently, they're animating an audiobook of Star Wars, where it's it's an audiobook of one of the Timothy Zahn sequels to the original trilogy. I think it's Dark Empire. Someone's currently doing an animation version of it, and it has like Billy D. Williams in it. It's from it's something that was selling, an audiobook that was selling, and had Billy D. Williams in it. So I would love if that treatment was with this.
All right, get with this, animators of the internet.
Please. One thing I wanted to kind of wrap it up with, because I think you did a great job and everything, and
Thank you,
and
man.
I hope if we get the chance to work together again, whether it be voiceover or even in front of a camera at some point,
Please.
I hope we get to do that, because this was really something special to me.
Mhm.
We talked about the process, before, current, after. I want to kind of talk about what your involvement meant to me, because I was coming to the point of like not even thinking this project was ever going to really happen, because there were so many moments of it happening, it not happening, and now recently it's kind of found its stride and we're actually editing. And I wanted to just say that you just kind of popping out of the blue, it's the greatest luck for me. It really was a motivator to get this thing happening. And I just, and us talking about what this project meant on both our ends, it really is. I feel very grateful. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
incredibly so, man.
Yeah.
Especially since we're like-minded Star Wars fans. It's the greatest thing about creating projects is doing it with people that you care about, people you learn to care about. You know what I mean? People you get to know. So I just wanted to thank you for that,
Yeah,
for everything,
thank
man,
you.
because you were great during it. It was great.
Yeah, it was for me too. It was a blast. It was such a welcome return to getting to play pretend in the most simplest, childlike way. And I think that everyone kind of needed that after the last 2 years. And it was it was a great reintroduction to that. And it also, and again, I know I've said this already, but it would also, you also made it, just by the quality of the writing, so easy too
Oh,
to
thank you.
to get lost in it.
Well, is there anything lastly you want to say to the listeners, the future listeners, about the project, about your experience, about anything?
I think the simplest and best thing that I could say about Star Wars Lightspeed is that it is Star Wars, and what images that conjures up for you, what feelings or experiences, or a I don't know, a longing for something that your life doesn't give, that can be found in Star Wars Lightspeed.
Mr. Port?
Gordon Locus. Heard through the Jogan Vine that you were looking for discrete transport. If you're willing to erase yourself from Charter's database, you did something to them.
They're after me because I made something that they want, and I said no. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That really is a very high compliment. Thank you for that. And yeah, I think that's all we got for today. If we talk again, we'll talk again.
Oh, count on it. Yeah.
We'll probably talk.
I see you all the time.
Yeah, all the time. But after this thing releases, I'm thinking of having a release party and everything.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And everything. So Christmas, we're gonna make it happen. All right, Nick. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, man. Thank you.